Have you ever been on a roll in business? Focused, clear, consistent. Everything is finally working, but then at some point, out of nowhere, you destroy it all and you're back at square one. And you start to hate yourself because you ruined everything again. You feel terrible and you ask yourself, why do I do this to myself? I lived like this for years and I can't count how many times I built everything up only to tear it down again. But after going through those cycles over and over, I found the solution, the real way to escape this loop forever. And today, I'm gonna give it to you. This video will seriously change how you think about consistency. Because everybody tells you that being consistent is about keeping your motivation and spirits up all the time, staying driven and motivated and committed and obsessed and finding your why and pushing harder until you achieve what you want. But that advice is incomplete. In fact, it's the reason why you keep burning out, because motivation is not a long-term trait. It's a short-term state that works as a drug on your mind. It spikes your energy, your drive, your excitement, but at the same time, your stress. And when you're hyped up, the brain tension skyrockets. And what does the brain do with too much tension? It looks for relief. That's why you can sprint for a few days, maybe weeks, and then crush hard. Because at some point, you need to come down from a motivational high. Here's what actually happens at the brain level. Every improvement, every growth happens outside of your comfort zone. And when you push outside of it, you spike a cocktail of neurochemicals, including cortisol, the stress hormone. And as you work, your baseline stress levels rise and rise and rise. And when the pressure gets too high, the valve pops. You skip the gym, you blow up the call, you doom scroll on Instagram, anything to release steam. And in that moment, the system cools down. Cortisol drops, dopamine hits, and the brain gets the calm and relief it needed. The problem is that the brain tags the act of quitting as a source of relief, and each relapse strengthens that wiring, which means that you're not lazy. You literally are neurologically hijacked. And you don't become inconsistent because you're weak. It's because your brain hasn't been trained to sustain the tension. In other words, the brain is addicted to that relief. And that is a real reason why you can't stay consistent. Because your brain is chasing the peace that comes after quitting. Think about the last time you started strong. 3 days in, you're riding high. Day 4, you're sitting there and you suddenly think, maybe I should take off to recover. You were not tired. You were stressed from staying consistent, and that recovery day was your brain getting its fix of relief. And this can happen when recording content, when doing outreach, and to me personally, it happens a lot with hiring. I know I need to hire. 3 days in, I get stressed out about all the complexity of the hiring process, and at some point I say, I just hire next quarter. That is how this affects me the most. You must train that pattern out of your system, because as you evolve, that pattern is going to show up in more sophisticated ways. And your job as an elite founder is to rewire that pattern out of your system. Because the worst thing you can do when you lose consistency is to try to get motivated again on the same thing. Motivation is what causes the crash. The higher your drive spikes, the harder your brain has to slam the brakes. So the solution is to rewire that pattern out of your brain. When you feel the urge to quit, that I'll do it later voice, that frustration, just jot down the trigger and follow the 60-second recode. First, you pause for 60 seconds. You don't act. That short delay breaks the relief loop. Then you do a quick breathwork exercise to lower your stress without abandoning the task. And then you finish the task. As simple as that. No discipline hacks, no willpower games, just control over your relief system. But the transformation happens when you do this consistently every day. That's what I call relief training. The process of teaching your brain to earn peace instead of escaping for it. And it happens in 3 stages. Stage 1 is to detect. For the next 7 days, keep a relief log. Every time you feel that trigger to stop when your mind is fighting you, to take a break, to delay, to drift, write down 3 words. What were you doing? How long did you sustain the pressure? And what you wanted to do instead. It can be maybe I was writing and then I checked my phone. By the end of the week, you will have the brain's relief blueprint. You literally see what are the things that are creating unnecessary tension your brain doesn't know how to handle. And that data is gold because awareness of your own patterns breaks that inertia. Stage number 2 is to replace. Now replace destructive relief with positive relief through an action that reduces stress. So for instance, instead of doom scrolling, you do 1 minute of breath work. Instead of skipping the gym, you lower the bar and go anywhere, or you go for a run. Or instead of leaving the desk, you stand up, stretch, and go back to work. And every time you do this, the brain learns, I can relax inside the work. I don't need to quit. And that is how you start rewriting your nervous system. And finally, stage 3 is to close. Attach relief to finishing the task. And every focus block, workout, or task with a deliberate decompression ritual. Maybe a walk, maybe one deep exhale, maybe a quick stretching. That rewards the brain to seek relief not in random pauses, but in closing loops. It makes consistency feel good because it rewires your dopamine response. And if you do this for just 1 week, you'll notice something strange. That crash that you had when doing something you didn't want to do, it starts to disappear. And for the first time, you don't need to amp yourself up to stay working because you have started to rewire the brain's addiction to relief. That is how you become consistent. The type of consistency that does not rely on mood, hype, or pressure. It relies on you learning to train your brain. I kept messing this up until I learned to earn peace instead of chase it. These days, I'm rewiring my brain to get better at hiring. But before that, I needed to get better at first speaking on camera in English, then writing in English, then doing outreach, then building product. Life is a continuous succession of growth expansion phases that we need to face with a smile. But if your brain is addicted to the relief that you provided by cutting a task midway, you will never become consistent. Retrain the brain to earn the right dopamine. And if you want our proven system to retrain your brain in about 6 weeks, book a call below and we'll be happy to tell you about it. See you in the next video.